Good morning, dear friends, and welcome into this quiet moment where our hearts find space to breathe, to awaken, and to remember that God meets us long before the world makes its demands. If you're listening now, I invite you to let your shoulders soften, your breath deepen, and your thoughts settle gently into this new day. Today we step into a story of awakening, a story that begins not with noise or urgency, but with the stillness of dawn, when everything around us is softened and the light has not yet claimed the horizon. It is here, in this delicate space between night and morning, that a person named Elias begins to learn what it truly means to stay spiritually awake. Elias had always been the kind who moved through his mornings slowly, savoring the quiet. But lately life had weighed heavily on his mind. Responsibilities multiplied, worries stretched their long shadows across his heart, and even simple tasks felt overwhelmingly loud. He woke up each day feeling behind before anything had even begun. Yet on this morning, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way the air held a gentle coolness, or how the first faint light brushed the walls of his room in muted gold. Or maybe it was simply that the world seemed to exhale with him, quietly whispering that not everything had to be rushed. Whatever it was, Elias felt drawn to pause longer than usual, as though God himself was inviting him into awareness before the day unfolded. As he sat at the edge of his bed, Elias remembered the scripture he had heard the day before. Jesus' call to stay awake, to live with hearts that do not grow dull from the weight of anxiety or sin. It struck him deeply because for months his heart had indeed been drifting, lulled into a spiritual drowsiness by stress, routine, and distraction. He prayed often, yes, but his prayers felt like passing sighs rather than conversations with the divine. And so, as morning light slowly gathered, Elias whispered a simple prayer. Lord, wake my heart again. It was not dramatic or eloquent, but sincere, and sincerity is the soil where grace loves to grow. He went to the window and opened it slightly, enough for the crisp morning air to kiss his face. From below, he could hear the soft stirrings of neighbors beginning their day. Footsteps, muted voices, the far-off rumble of an engine. Life was moving again, and yet there was a peace here, as if God were gently reminding him that this day was not something to fear, but something to live. He made himself a cup of warm tea and sat near the window, allowing the steam to drift upward like a small offering, noticing how easily gratitude awakened when he allowed himself to slow down. The world was still dim, but light was surely coming, and Elias felt that this mirrored something in his heart. Perhaps spiritual awakening wasn't always a sudden moment of revelation, but a gradual unfolding, much like dawn, quiet, steady, gentle. As he sipped the tea, he observed how much he had allowed worry to build walls inside him. Small anxieties had accumulated like loose stones. One by one, they didn't seem heavy, but together they formed something that blocked his own light. He worried about work, about relationships, about mistakes he might make, about the expectations he felt incapable of meeting. Every layer of fear dulled his awareness of God's presence. And yet the gospel's call returned again in his thoughts. Stay awake, not in fear, not in frantic preparation, but in spiritual alertness, an alertness born of prayer, trust, and openness to grace. Elias closed his eyes and remembered a saint he admired, one who had lived centuries ago with courage so quiet it could easily be overlooked. This saint didn't achieve greatness through grand acts, but through consistent faithfulness. By showing up each day with an awake heart, attentive to God in the small, ordinary things. Elias found himself aspiring to that same kind of grounded life. A life where faith wasn't only lived in moments of crisis, but was woven into the gentle rhythms of morning, work, conversation, and rest. Let me begin again today, he murmured to God. Let me be present where I am. As the sky brightened, the world outside revealed more color. The soft blue of early morning deepened into a clearer hue, and distant rooftops glowed with the first touches of sunlight. Nature itself seemed to be participating in the gentle awakening. Elias always found comfort in watching the light shift, because it reminded him that God's work is often slow, patient, and constant. The rising sun asked nothing of him except to witness it, and in witnessing, he felt his heartbeat slow into a peaceful, steady rhythm. He watched a small bird land on the branch of the tree outside his window. Its wings fluttered in tiny bursts, as if warming up for a day of searching for food, building nests, and singing its simple song. Elias smiled at the thought that even the smallest creatures live with an instinctive trust in God's provision. They did not worry about tomorrow. They simply rose and lived the day they were given. For the first time in a long time, Elias felt an openness inside him. Like a window long closed, finally cracked open again. He thought back on moments when he had allowed distractions to steal his peace. There had been evenings when he spent hours scrolling through endless updates, comparing his life to others, losing focus on what truly mattered. There were mornings when he rushed so quickly into tasks that he forgot to pray, forgetting that prayer was not an obligation, but a gift. He realized now how easily a heart could drift without noticing, how subtly spiritual sleepiness could creep in until it felt normal. But today, as the day began with softness and reflection, Elias felt the grace of beginning again. He felt God inviting him not into perfection, but into awareness. An awareness that would shape how he spoke, how he worked, how he moved through the hours ahead. The call to vigilance no longer felt heavy. It felt loving, as though Christ himself were whispering, "Stay with me, walk with me, notice me." He took another slow breath and let the warmth in his chest settle. This, he thought, is what it means to be awake. Not startled or anxious, but attentive, receptive, available. Vigilance wasn't about dread, it was about presence. It was about refusing to let the noise of the world drown out the quiet voice of God. And in this renewed awareness, Elias felt a small courage growing, a courage that didn't require him to fix his entire life at once, but simply to walk into this day with an open heart. As he finished his tea, the sun lifted higher, and the room grew bright. He stood, stretched gently, and looked around his small apartment. Nothing had changed externally. His responsibilities remained the same. His tasks still waited. But inside him, something had shifted. A softness, a readiness, a willingness to live differently today, starting not with grand declarations, but with a humble, quiet intention to remain spiritually awake. Elias whispered one last prayer before stepping into the day. "Lord, walk with me. Help me notice you in every moment. Keep my heart awake." And with that, he opened his door, stepped into the light, and began the day. Not with fear, not with rushing, but with a calm awakening that felt like a seed of transformation. Elias stepped outside into the morning air with the same quiet intention that had filled his heart moments earlier. The neighborhood was slowly awakening, yet everything still felt softened by the early light, wrapped in a calm that made the world seem more spacious, more breathable. As he walked toward the small park near his home, he felt a gentle gratitude rising within him, not because circumstances had changed, but because his awareness had shifted. The day no longer felt like something he had to conquer. It felt like something he could walk through slowly, with God beside him. The path leading to the park was lined with tall trees, each one shedding its leaves in a slow cascade of color. Elias watched as a single leaf drifted downward, carried gently by the breeze. He found himself thinking of how the leaf didn't resist, didn't struggle, didn't cling to the branch longer than it was meant to. It simply let go when the season called for it. Elias wondered what stories of his own heart he still held tightly, fears he hadn't released, worries he allowed to linger even when they no longer belonged. The simplicity of the falling leaf stirred something quiet within him, a desire to surrender the burdens he had been carrying without noticing how heavy they had become. He reached his usual bench near the water, where the surface of the pond reflected the soft hues of dawn. Ducks glided across it calmly, creating ripples that spread outward in gentle circles. Elias sat down, breathing in the stillness. This place had always given him peace, but today it felt like a teacher, guiding him into deeper awareness. He didn't need to analyze his feelings or solve every uncertainty. He only needed to be present, to let the morning speak to him the way God often spoke, in whispers, in quiet invitations, in the soft unfolding of ordinary beauty. A few people passed by, an older man walking his dog, a woman jogging slowly, a couple speaking in hushed tones as they strolled along the path. Elias watched them with a kind of tenderness, realizing how each person carried their own quiet stories, their own unseen worries and hopes. He wondered how often he moved through life, forgetting that others were also trying to stay awake spiritually, to navigate their days with courage and grace. This thought humbled him and softened him even more. Awareness wasn't just about noticing God, it was about noticing others with gentleness. He closed his eyes for a moment and let the sounds of the morning surround him. Birds calling softly, the distant hum of traffic beginning, the faint rustle of leaves as the breeze brushed through the trees. It felt like a living tapestry, woven with threads of simplicity and peace. Elias imagined his heart resting in that tapestry, no longer tense or hurried, but gently held by something larger and steadier than himself. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Prayer rose naturally from within him, not because he forced it, but because gratitude had created space for it. Thank you, Lord, for this quiet, for this peace, for inviting me to slow down. It was a simple prayer, but sincerity gave it weight. Elias felt as though he were learning again how to pray, not with many words, but with openness. As he sat with his eyes closed, an image formed in his mind, a lamp softly glowing in a dark room. Its light was small, delicate, yet enough to keep shadows from taking over. Elias sensed that this was what Jesus meant when he spoke of staying awake, keeping the lamp of the heart lit, even when life grew dim or distracting. It wasn't about being flawless, it was about being attentive, staying connected to the quiet flame of faith that God himself sustained. He opened his eyes slowly and felt a renewed sense of calm. The sun had now begun to rise fully, touching the tops of the trees with a warm golden light. The pond shimmered more brightly, and the world felt gently alive. Elias stayed seated for a moment longer, allowing the warmth to rest on his skin. There was nothing remarkable happening, yet everything felt meaningful, because he was present enough to notice. After some time, he rose from the bench and walked along the path, still carrying the peace of the morning with him. He watched his steps thoughtfully, feeling grounded in a way he had not felt in a long while. Even the rhythm of his walking felt like a quiet prayer, a reminder that every small movement could become an offering when done with awareness. He paused near a small wooden bridge overlooking the water. Leaning against the rail, he let his gaze follow the gentle current below. The water flowed without hurry, without fear that it would run out of strength or direction. It simply moved as it was made to move. Elias wondered what life might look like if he trusted God with that same natural confidence, allowing himself to flow through each day without forcing outcomes or fearing what he could not control. A faint smile formed on his face. "Help me trust like that," he whispered. "Help me move gently, the way you designed me to." Again, the simplicity of his own words surprised him, but each one felt honest, and honesty welcomed grace. The sun continued to brighten, casting longer rays through the trees. Elias knew it was time to begin the responsibilities of the day, yet he didn't want to rush away from this peace. He decided to carry it with him deliberately. As he walked back toward his home, he repeated in his heart, "Stay awake, stay present, stay with God." These words were not commands but companions, something to hold on to when moments later in the day became noisy or heavy. When he arrived home, he took one last deep breath before stepping inside. He felt centered, steady, grounded. Nothing dramatic had happened in the park, no grand revelation or sudden transformation, but something gentle indeed had begun, a quiet reawakening, like the first soft light before sunrise. He spent the next hour preparing for work in a calm and unhurried rhythm, making breakfast, gathering what he needed, checking his messages without letting them steal his peace. In every small action, he reminded himself that God was near, that the morning stillness was not meant to stay behind, but to move through the day with him. Before leaving, he paused at the doorway, resting his hand briefly on the frame as though steadying himself. He whispered, "Thank you for this beginning. Help me remain awake today." With that, he stepped outside once more, greeted by a brighter world that felt both familiar and new. As Elias walked down the street toward the bus stop, he felt an unexpected lightness inside him. Not the kind that erased problems, but the kind that reminded him he didn't have to face them alone. The awareness he had nurtured that morning became like a soft lamp in his heart, guiding him gently forward. And as the day opened before him, he carried that lamp quietly, trusting that as long as he kept noticing God's presence in the small things, he would remain awake to the deeper meaning in everything. Throughout the morning hours, Elias carried a quiet steadiness with him, the kind that didn't draw attention, yet shaped every moment from within. The bus ride to work passed peacefully as he sat by the window, watching the city move through its own awakening. People hurried across intersections, coffee in hand, eyes focused ahead. Traffic lights flickered between colors as cars rolled past in predictable rhythms. Small shops lifted their shutters as the day officially began. Amid all this motion, Elias felt strangely anchored, as though the calm he cultivated earlier was gently shielding him from the noise that usually overwhelmed him. He leaned his head against the window and allowed himself to breathe slowly. The world outside was full of movement, but inside his chest, there was a stillness he had not known in a long while. It made him wonder how often peace was available, yet overlooked simply because he hadn't paused long enough to find it. The morning had taught him something essential, that awareness was like a doorway to grace, and that by choosing to step through it, he could meet the day not with anxiety, but with presence. When the bus arrived at his stop, he stepped onto the sidewalk and walked toward his building. The morning sun had now risen fully, painting the city in warm, lively tones. He greeted the security guard at the entrance with a gentle smile, noticing the surprise and appreciation in the man's eyes. It struck Elias how even small exchanges could become moments of grace when approached with intention. He carried that thought with him as he made his way to his desk. His workspace was modest but comforting. A clean desk, a small plant he had nurtured for months, a few handwritten notes taped to the wall. Usually, sitting down here signaled the beginning of a long day filled with tasks and deadlines that often felt endless. But today, Elias took a moment to look around with softer eyes. Nothing about the space had changed, yet everything felt different because he felt different. He whispered a simple prayer as he touched the edge of his desk. "Help me stay awake here too, Lord. Help me carry this peace into the work I do." As the hours passed, Elias felt his attention shift from the heaviness he once associated with his tasks to a more open curiosity. He approached each assignment with gentleness rather than pressure, taking breaks when needed, breathing deeply when his mind grew cluttered. He noticed that by staying aware of his thoughts instead of getting lost in them, he could respond to challenges with more clarity. The usual tension that tightened his shoulders seemed to loosen, and even mistakes, when they inevitably appeared, felt less like failures and more like opportunities to learn slowly and humbly. At one point, a coworker named Maren approached his desk. She carried a stack of papers and an expression that looked slightly strained. "Hey, Elias," she said softly, "do you have a minute? I'm a bit overwhelmed with this project and thought maybe you could help me understand part of it." Normally, Elias might have felt bothered by interruptions, but today he welcomed the moment as an invitation to be present, not just to God, but to another person. He nodded kindly, motioning for her to sit. As she explained the issue, her voice wavered just slightly, betraying a sense of discouragement she hadn't intended to show. Elias listened carefully, not rushing to find solutions, simply giving her his full attention. When she finished, he offered a calm explanation of what she needed to do, walking her through the details gently. As he spoke, he noticed her shoulders beginning to relax, her breath softening, her eyes brightening with relief. "Thank you," she said at last, her voice steadier. "I really needed that. I've been so tense all morning." Elias smiled softly. "I understand," he replied. "It happens to all of us. Sometimes a little clarity and a quiet moment make all the difference." When she left, he sat for a moment in silence, feeling the quiet joy of having helped someone simply by being attentive. It wasn't the task itself that felt meaningful. It was the connection, the slowing down, the reminder that staying spiritually awake often meant noticing the needs of those around him. The rest of the morning continued in this gentle rhythm until eventually lunchtime arrived. Elias stepped outside into the fresh air, wanting to reconnect with the stillness he felt earlier. He walked toward a small courtyard near the building, where a fountain created a soft, steady sound that mingled with the breeze. A few people sat on benches eating or talking quietly, but Elias found an empty corner where he could sit alone. Closing his eyes, he let the calm of the space wash over him. The sunlight warmed his face, and the repetitive sound of water soothed his mind. He felt himself exhale fully, letting go of any subtle tension that had gathered throughout the morning. "Thank you for this moment," he whispered, "for the small rests that keep my heart steady." As he sat there, his thoughts drifted gently, not in a chaotic swirl, but in a reflective flow that felt peaceful. He thought of how different this day felt from so many others. In the past, he often believed that change required dramatic transformation, grand gestures, or emotional breakthroughs. But now he realized that true awakening often came quietly, through small choices, small prayers, small moments of awareness. He felt humbled by the simplicity of it. He opened his eyes slowly and watched a leaf fall from a nearby tree, drifting lazily toward the ground. The image reminded him again of letting go, not as a dramatic surrender, but as a gentle release. He wondered what he could let go of in his own life, not out of frustration, but out of trust. Perhaps he could release the habit of overthinking. Perhaps he could let go of judging himself so harshly. Perhaps he could loosen his grip on expectations that only created pressure. Each thought felt like a soft invitation, not a demand. When lunchtime ended, Elias returned to work carrying this renewed calm. The afternoon unfolded much like the morning, slowly, peacefully, with an awareness that deepened little by little. He noticed the way sunlight entered the windows and cast soft patterns across the office floor. He noticed the hum of conversation among coworkers, the occasional laughter rising above it. He noticed his own breath, how it remained steady even when tasks became challenging. He felt himself moving through the day with a quiet intention, to remain awake to God, to himself, and to the present moment. As the workday came to an end, Elias packed his things and headed toward the exit. He felt a tenderness toward the day, not because it had been remarkable, but because it had been real, lived with openness rather than resistance. He stepped outside and let the evening air greet him. The sun had begun its descent, casting the city in a warm golden glow that softened every edge. Elias felt the same glow inside his chest. He walked toward the bus stop with slow steps, savoring the gentle transition from day to evening. He reflected on how presence had shaped every experience today. Not every moment had been perfect, not every thought had been peaceful, but he had returned again and again to awareness, like a lamp being tended so its flame would not fade. As he waited for the bus, he noticed a little girl holding her mother's hand, pointing excitedly at something in the sky. Elias followed her gesture and saw a small flock of birds flying overhead, their wings catching the last light of day. The sight filled him with a quiet joy. Even in this busy corner of the city, even amid the noise of passing cars and rushing people, there was beauty, small, fleeting, easily missed, yet deeply nourishing. When the bus arrived and he stepped inside, Elias felt deeply grateful. Not for anything extraordinary, but for the simple grace of living this day awake, attentive, and held gently by God's presence. He knew that tomorrow might bring new challenges, new distractions, new pressures, but he also knew that awareness could meet him again in the quiet moments before dawn, inviting him once more into peace. And as he sat by the window on the ride home, he let his heart whisper a final prayer for the day. Keep me awake, Lord, in the quiet things, in the small things, in all things. The evening settled around Elias like a gentle cloak by the time he reached home, yet the peace within him remained unbroken. The day had unfolded with a grace he did not manufacture but simply received. And even now, as the sun slipped behind rooftops and painted the sky in amber and fading gold, he felt that same quiet awareness still holding him steady. He placed his keys on the small wooden table near the door, noticing how even the smallest motions felt slower, more deliberate, as though the day had taught him to move with a new rhythm, one not governed by urgency, but by presence. He warmed a simple meal on the stove and sat at his small kitchen table, allowing the silence of the room to surround him. Silence was no longer an empty space he had to fill with noise or distraction. Instead, it had become a companion, an opening, a doorway, a soft place where his thoughts could breathe freely. As he ate, he reflected on how often he had rushed through moments like this, treating them as transitions instead of invitations. But tonight he felt different. The quiet held him tenderly, and for once, he did not resist it. After dinner, he stepped onto the small balcony outside his apartment. The night air was cool, brushing gently against his skin. Above him, the sky stretched wide and scattered with early stars. Streetlights flickered on below, casting warm orbs of light across the pavement. A few people walked past on the sidewalk, their footsteps echoing faintly. Elias leaned on the balcony railing and breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the day slowly dissolving. Something stirred in him, a desire not just to maintain this peace, but to deepen it. Earlier in the day, he had learned to return to awareness again and again. Now he sensed the invitation to return even more deeply, not only through breath or attention, but through gratitude. Gratitude, he realized, was not merely a polite expression, but a doorway into awareness itself. It gathered scattered pieces of the heart and brought them gently back to God. He whispered softly into the night, "Thank you for today, for the quiet moments, for the moments of clarity, for the strength to be present." The words were simple, yet they settled inside him with a warmth that felt almost physical. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting gratitude expand within him until it touched every part of his day. The morning prayer, the calm bus ride, the gentle help he was able to offer Marin, the sunlight on his desk, the courtyard fountain, the flock of birds, the golden glow of sunset. Each memory felt like a small pearl, strung together on a thread of grace. After a few minutes, Elias stepped back into his apartment and prepared for rest. He changed into comfortable clothes, washed his face, and sat at the edge of his bed. But before lying down, he paused, sensing the quiet stirring again. The invitation to reflect not only on the peace he'd experienced, but on the deeper movement taking place within him. He realized that today had not changed his circumstances. The same tasks, the same responsibilities, the same people waited for him tomorrow. Yet something fundamental had shifted inside him. He had learned not to run ahead of himself. He had learned not to live tangled in thoughts of what might go wrong or what he feared he couldn't handle. Instead, he had learned to inhabit each moment as it came, trusting that grace meets him not in imagined futures, but in the present breath. He laid down gently and let his head rest on the pillow. As he stared at the ceiling, he thought about the idea of vigilance, the spiritual watchfulness Jesus spoke about in the gospel reading that morning. For the first time, Elias understood it not as a posture of fear, but as one of openness. To remain vigilant was to remain awake to where God was already moving, even in silence, even in routine, even in difficulty. It was a readiness not rooted in dread, but in trust. That trust had carried him through the day. It had softened his reactions, quieted his anxieties, and made space for kindness, toward himself and toward others. It had allowed him to live the day not as something to survive, but as something to receive. As the night deepened, he felt a heaviness on his eyelids. Before sleep could draw him in, however, a subtle thought arose, gentle yet clear, like a whisper inside him. Tomorrow will offer new chances to stay awake. Do not be afraid if you fail. Awareness is not about perfection, it is about returning. He smiled inwardly. The gentleness of that inner reminder felt like grace itself. When he finally closed his eyes, Elias slipped into sleep with a sense of openness in his chest, as though his heart had stretched just a little wider during the day. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was how much that openness would matter when morning arrived again. But dawn always comes differently for a heart being changed. The first light slipped softly through his curtains, not abruptly, but in a slow, warm unveiling. Elias awoke naturally without the jolt of the alarm, as though something inside him was already awake before his eyes opened. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet rhythm of the morning outside, the distant murmur of early traffic, the faint song of a bird perched somewhere nearby, the subtle hum of life renewing itself. He sat up slowly, feeling grounded and steady, as though the peace from the previous day had seeped into the foundation of his being. But almost immediately, he noticed something else as well, a subtle heaviness in his chest, a familiar resistance that tried to pull him into old patterns of worry. It wasn't loud, but it was there, creeping, whispering, tugging at the edges of his mind. Elias took a deep breath. "Not today," he murmured softly. "Not like before." He stood and stretched, then walked to the small corner of his room where he prayed each morning. Sitting on the floor, he rested his palms on his knees and let his breath settle. He knew that the heaviness he felt did not mean he had lost the peace he'd gained. It simply meant he was human. Peace wasn't a permanent state. It was a practice, a returning, a choosing. Closing his eyes, he allowed the heaviness to be present rather than fighting it. Awareness, he had learned, was not forcing emotions away, but making space for them without letting them dictate everything. As he breathed, the heaviness softened slightly, enough for him to whisper, "I'm here, Lord, even if I'm not perfect, even if I'm tired. I'm here." A quiet stillness enveloped him, like morning light wrapping itself around a shadow. And in that stillness, he sensed again the gentle invitation he had felt yesterday. Wakefulness, presence, trust. He remained there for several minutes, letting the peace inside him rebuild itself gently, like a tide returning to shore. When he finally stood and prepared for the day, he felt steadier, not because the heaviness had vanished completely, but because he no longer feared it. It was just another thing to meet with awareness. As he left his apartment and stepped into the cool morning air, the city greeted him once more with its usual noise and movement. Yet Elias walked with a calm center, as though the world's pace no longer dictated his own. He reached the bus stop feeling grateful, not for a perfect day ahead, but for a day he could walk through awake. And deep down, he sensed something growing in him, a quiet strength, a new resilience, a deepening trust that God was with him, not in loud revelations, but in the slow transformation of ordinary hours. Whatever the day would bring, he was ready to meet it with awareness, breath by breath, moment by moment, grace upon grace. The bus pulled into the city center with its familiar rumble, but Elias stepped off as though he were entering it for the first time. There was something in the air, an almost imperceptible quiet beneath the noise, a still rhythm under the hurried footsteps of commuters. He sensed it not with his ears, but with something deeper, the same inner softness that had been growing within him since yesterday. It made everything appear clearer, sharper, more illuminated, as though the world had always been speaking gently, and he was only now learning how to listen. He walked toward his office building, noticing things he had long overlooked: the pattern of shadows cast by the tall buildings, the way sunlight glimmered on passing car windows, the subtle fragrance of fresh bread drifting from a nearby bakery. Each detail felt like a small gift waiting to be received. For years, he had moved through mornings like someone rushing through a tunnel, seeing only what he needed to see to get by. Today, however, was different. Today, the tunnel had opened into something vast and filled with meaning. Inside the building, he greeted the security guard with the same warm sincerity as the day before. But this time, he noticed how the man's expression softened instantly, as though gratitude flickered behind his eyes. It struck Elias again how presence, simple, focused presence, could ripple outward in ways he never expected. When he reached his desk, he placed his bag down slowly and sat for a moment before touching anything else. He wanted to savor the stillness within him rather than rush into work out of habit. He closed his eyes and took a single, deep breath, the same breath he had taken that morning before leaving home, the same breath that had anchored him yesterday. With each inhale and exhale, he felt his awareness settle into place, steady and grounded. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and that reality gave him strength. The morning unfolded with the gentle clarity he had hoped for. His tasks felt purposeful rather than burdensome. He approached challenges with patience instead of frustration. When emails arrived with urgent requests, he didn't feel the familiar tightening in his chest. Instead, he responded with calm intention, focusing on one thing at a time rather than trying to tackle everything at once. Bit by bit, he noticed a truth forming inside him. Anxiety came from imagining the whole day at once, while peace came from living only the moment he was actually in. Around mid-morning, Marin returned to his desk with a shy smile. "I wanted to thank you again for your help yesterday," she said, holding a small sealed envelope. "This is just something little, but I wanted you to know I really appreciated your kindness." Elias accepted it gently. "You didn't need to do anything," he said, meaning every word. "I know," she replied softly, "but sometimes a single peaceful moment can change a whole day, and you gave me that." She walked away before he could respond. Elias placed the envelope on his desk without opening it. What moved him wasn't the gift. It was the realization that the calm he carried inside had quietly reached someone else. His inner transformation had not been loud, yet it echoed outward in ways he had never imagined. He wondered how many days he had lived in fear, stress, or distraction, unaware that he was offering the world a heart tight with worry. Now he realized he was offering something different. Not perfection, not certainty, but presence. During lunch, he returned to the courtyard fountain, drawn again to the steady sound of falling water. The courtyard was busier than yesterday, filled with chatter and movement, but Elias found a quiet corner under a patch of sunlight. He unwrapped his simple meal and ate slowly, watching the patterns in the fountain's ripples. Each ripple reminded him of how grace worked. Not in straight lines, not with force, but in gentle, widening circles that began at a center and touched everything around it. He felt a stirring within him, a thought rising quietly like a bubble underwater. Maybe this is what it means to stay awake. Not to strive endlessly, not to control everything, but to notice the grace already unfolding and choose not to resist it. When he finished eating, he leaned back and closed his eyes, allowing the warmth of the sun to fall gently across his face. In that warmth, he sensed something holy, something steady and familiar, something that had been with him long before he learned to recognize it. He whispered, barely moving his lips, "Thank you for being patient with me." He returned to work with renewed strength, and the remaining hours flowed by gently. Even when a sudden technical issue arose in the afternoon, threatening to throw the office into stress, Elias found himself responding with surprising clarity. He offered solutions calmly, and his steady tone helped others regain their composure. By the time the issue was fixed, several co-workers remarked on how grounded he seemed. One of them, a man named Ron, who usually hid his emotions behind sarcasm, approached Elias afterward. "I don't know what's changed in you," he said with a half smile, "but whatever it is, keep it up. You make things feel less chaotic." The comment lingered with Elias long after Ron walked away. It humbled him. Not because he wanted praise, but because he had never expected inner transformation to be visible, let alone helpful, to others. It showed him that when a person chooses peace, others feel it too. When one heart becomes steadier, the world around it subtly steadies as well. When the workday ended, Elias stepped outside and felt the cool afternoon breeze sweep gently across his face. He walked toward the bus stop with unhurried steps, letting each sensation sink into him. The rustling of trees overhead, the distant laughter of children, the rhythmic tapping of a crosswalk signal. He sensed that life was speaking softly in every moment, and all it required was attentiveness to hear it. He boarded the bus and sat near the window. As the city passed before him, he reflected on the past 2 days. Something significant had shifted inside him, but it was not a shift that could be measured in achievements or dramatic events. It was quieter, deeper, an interior awakening, a willingness to live the day with open eyes and an open heart. It was learning to meet God in real time, not just in prayers spoken aloud, but in breath, in attention, in small decisions, in kindness freely offered, in surrender to what is rather than fear of what might be. He remembered the gospel he had meditated on that morning, Jesus urging his disciples to stay awake, to keep their hearts from drifting into heaviness or distraction. For the first time, Elias understood the tenderness behind that warning. It wasn't about fear of punishment. It was about staying connected to the presence that made life meaningful. Sleepwalking through days, lost in anxiety or numb routine, was its own kind of suffering. Awareness was liberation. When he arrived home, he placed his bag on the table and sat by the window as the last light of day faded. The sky deepened from gold to violet, and the first evening star appeared in the distance. Elias rested his forehead against the glass and allowed a single realization to settle gently into his spirit. The kind of realization that doesn't come often but changes everything when it does. Staying awake is not a task, it is a grace. And grace grows wherever the heart makes room, even if the room feels small. He exhaled slowly, feeling the truth of it resonate through him. His heart was still learning, still stretching, still stumbling at times, but it was awake, and that was enough. Before closing the curtains, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me. Help me not to give up on myself." The room fell into quiet again, and Elias felt a peace that reached deeper than the peace of yesterday. It was not the peace of having solved all problems or secured all outcomes. It was the peace of knowing he was not walking alone. That awakening was not something he had to force, but something that God was gently growing within him, one breath at a time. This peace would not make life perfect. It would not remove challenges or erase uncertainty, but it would guide him through each day, teaching him again and again how to return to awareness, how to remain present, how to trust. And as he prepared for rest, Elias felt a certainty blossoming quietly within him. Tomorrow would bring new moments to awaken, new invitations to breathe, new ways to grow. And he was ready to meet them, not with fear, but with openness. Because once a heart has learned to stay awake, even imperfectly, it never truly goes back to sleep. Before we close, let this final thought stay with you. A heart that learns to stay awake to God's presence, gently, quietly, consistently, begins to see meaning where others see routine, hope where others see worry, and grace where others see only emptiness. The true transformation of life often begins not with dramatic events, but with simple awareness. One sincere breath, one act of kindness, one moment of choosing peace over fear. If you can carry even one awakened moment into tomorrow, your whole journey can begin to change. Thank you, Sacred Heart family, for spending this time in reflection and prayer. If this story touched your heart in any way, I invite you to like this video to help it reach more souls. Share it with someone who might need peace today. Subscribe to join our growing prayer family and comment below with a word of gratitude or a prayer intention so we can lift you up together.